Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Global Card Collectors. I'm your host, Will, and today we have two guests on at the same time, two really big vintage football fans. One is Justin, who you might have seen from an earlier episode, and we have another new guest, Mike. So let's start with the brand new guest, Mike. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe why vintage football, and let's go from there.
Sure. So I'm in my 50s now, and I live in New Jersey, and I happen to have the distinct privilege of growing up in the junk wax era. And as a kid, I could go to my local candy store, which was, I grew up in a pretty urban area, so there was candy stores on the block, and they would sell football cards. So as a kid, I would go in there and I would buy some cards, and just started to collect that way. For me personally, buying packs of cards was always a good thrill, but I was never lucky. And I'll give a perfect example of when Peyton Manning's rookie year. When you're looking at the '98, you'd go out and you'd buy like the SP set, and you had the hope, you had the dream that you were going to pull Peyton Manning, and I pulled Brian Calhoun, who no one's ever heard of. I never heard of Brian Calhoun, and needless to say, he was a Detroit Lion, and he never made the team. So. There I go spending $200 on a box, and I pull Brian Calhoun. So, after many, many, iterations of buying boxes and just never really having any luck, I said to myself, if I keep buying these boxes, all the money that I've spent, I could just buy the guy that I was really looking for, If I'm buying 2 or 3 of these boxes, just buy the guy you want. And from there, I started to say to myself, why am I hedging my bet on guys that haven't proven anything yet? You're getting a guy that's a rookie. And another perfect example would be Sam Bradford. I'm a Ram fan. So, when Sam Bradford came out, Heisman winner, you're looking at him and you're like, I'm going to buy all these Sam Bradford cars. What happened with him? I mean, nothing. The guy did nothing, basically for my team, got traded, made a ton of money off of us. And his rookie card is, $2 now, $3. So, I'd rather put my money into people that have proven careers, and that's the vintage guys. Their careers are done. They're not going to go any better or any worse. They've made their Pro Bowls. They've made their, all-star teams. They are just going to be in the Hall of Fame, not in the Hall of Fame, the Hall of Very Good. So I started to gear myself off into collecting the guys that I really followed growing up and who I respected.
That's really smart. And even if you think about it from a person from the junk wax era, like the overprinting of the cards in our era and that sort of thing. But if you go back a couple of generations, there's a lot less cards that were printed to begin with. And obviously over time, they just become rarer and rarer, So it's definitely a smart move.
Yeah.
So you said you were a Rams fan? Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. So everyone in my family liked a different team. My dad was a Giants fan. My brother was a Raiders fan. And this is the true story. I came home in the 3rd grade, sat down on the couch, went shopping with my mom, sat down on the couch. My dad was watching the Giants. And I said, what team do you like? And he said, I like the team in the blue. So I said, okay, I'll like that team too. And he told me, no, you don't have to like the same team as me. What's your favorite color? And I said, yellow. What's your other favorite color? Blue. And he goes, you're a Rams fan. And the very next week, he got me a Jack Youngblood jersey, 1979, a Jack Youngblood jersey. And I was hooked ever since then. And incidentally, every time I come across a Jack Youngblood card, I buy it. I will pay double or triple because it's worth that to me. And a lot of people will always, what is a card worth? A card is worth what you're willing to pay for it. And that's the bottom line. So for me, a Jack Youngblood card could be $5 on eBay where I would pay 15 or 20 for it because I like the guy, because I followed his career and he was my first jersey. And incidentally, Jack Youngblood does sign through the mail, and I have tons of his autographs. The guy is just a phenomenal, nice guy.
Well, I guess it's pretty lucky that you're a Rams fan then, right? Because I know that with other teams, there might be certain players who might not be doing that kind of thing these days,
Yeah.
Or they might just be a lot more expensive.
True.
Justin, do you want to give us a little bit of a just a recap on yourself as a collector, or even how you got into vintage? I kind of remember, but not quite. So, if you wouldn't mind just going over a little bit, because I remember you saying that you were like a basketball fan, you were dabbling
Yeah.
here and there, and then you really did start getting, I think, a lot more intentional. It's one of the things that I absolutely remember from our conversation last time was that you're very, very intentional as a collector. And me, I just can't help myself. I'm here, there, and everywhere, And so having that discipline as a collector is important. And so I definitely respect you for that. And I'm trying my best to be less kind of like, just following the wind and going left, right, and center. But it's difficult to change your stripes.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, I'm very happy to be back and very happy to be here with Mike. I loved that story. I loved everything about that. Mike's path to football, I think a little more straightforward than mine. Though I love the Jack Youngblood thing. I'm actually a University of Florida alum. I went to grad school there, so Jack Youngblood's one of our guys, on our circle of fame there too. So I actually love Jack Youngblood as well. So very cool. But so for me, yeah, as I kind of talked about last time, a later junk wax era kid. I'm 40 now, so late 80s, kind of 89 is when I really kind of cognizantly remember getting into collecting, and which was a really good year for junk wax cards because I was buying multiple sports, and among the sets that came out that year were 89 Upper Deck with that iconic Griffey card, 89 Score, which still has one of my favorite cards to this day as a Lions fan, that 89 Score Barry Sanders. But yeah, when I collected as a kid, I was all over the place: basketball, baseball, football, just picking up anything I could. And then when I got back into collecting in 2018, I kind of jumped back in the same way that I jumped out, so to speak, where I was kind of all over the place. Like, okay, what players do I like now? Kind of with this sport, that sport, going a little bit all over. But as a kid, football was my main sport. That's what I played in high school, a little bit in college, and that's what kind of I grew up. And I mentioned this last time, that football was the kind of the sport that my family watched most frequently together. And when I was a kid, and Mike, you'll no doubt remember this, NFL Films was a big thing. And I remember watching a lot of NFL films. Like I said last time, Jim Brown, Johnny Unitas, Don Hudson, all these guys were on there, and I kind of got connected to the history of the sport through that. So there was always kind of a bit of appreciation for football history that wasn't exactly there in the same way in other sports. So when I got back into collecting, I kind of, was rolling the same way I used to for a while. And then when I got COVID in 2020, I, was just confined to my room and spent a lot of time on ComC. And as I said, for whatever reason, I started thinking about, okay, what were the cards I wanted as a kid, working backwards a little bit. And for whatever reason, I still can't remember why, but I typed in Earl Campbell. I want to see how much that 79 rookie card of his costs. And it was sub $20. It was like $15 or something. I'm like, that would be a really awesome card to have. So bought that. And then from there started thinking, I've always wanted an 81 Montana, an 86 Jerry Rice. Went back and bought some of those guys. And from there, it just kept kind of working back and thinking, wow, I'm an adult now. I make some money. Let's look at a Jim Brown rookie. Let's look at a Johnny Unitas rookie. Some of these cards that, to me would have been obviously not in my range as a kid, but players that I always looked at and was like, wow, and I remember seeing these cards in Beckett magazine as a kid thinking those would be so cool to have. So I kind of got on that train in 2020 and just haven't really felt the need to get off. Yet kind of like you, Will, I still get my eye caught by other things from time to time. But vintage football and football in general, my thing now is trying to get a rookie card for every NFL Hall of Famer. I'm pretty close to completing that at this point. There's one that I think is going to be out of my reach for a long time, but the vintage football stuff is always going to kind of be the heart of my collection and the thing I have the most interest in.
So, right. Justin, it's funny that you mentioned I am chasing the same thing that you are, apparently. Oh, so awesome. I do Hall of Fame rookie cards, and I'm trying for every Hall of Fame rookie player that I have, I'm trying to also get an autograph of that player.
That's going to be tough.
So it is getting tough. I have now 276 Hall of Fame rookies. So there's 371 in the Hall of Fame. I got 276. and I believe I have about 210 autographs.
Wow.
So I've now started to get to the guys like you that are, the Joe Namaths that are kind of like, you got to hide that from your wife or you're going to be sleeping in the garage type, but you gotta be careful on some of them.
I actually pulled the trigger on a 65 Namath just this year since I was on the show last. That was one. I had a buddy who had one, and it was a 1.5 SGC 1.5, but it was a nice looking 1.5. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do it someday. I don't have to pay the fees on it. It's not on eBay. Guy's giving me a fair price. Let's do it. But the auto thing, I do autos too, but not to that degree. That is really impressive because there's some guys that are tough to get from those Hall of Famers.
They are. And you know what? I mean, I don't know how it works for you or for Will. I mean, in my honest opinion, I don't think there's a right or wrong way to collect. Some people collect sets,
Absolutely.
They collect players, they can collect years, they can collect teams. That's what makes the hobby great. Anyone can jump into it and just like what you like. I don't need an influencer to tell me you should be buying this. I buy what I like, and I think every collector has to have some kind of side hustle when you're buying cards. And what I mean by that is, either you have to sacrifice, instead of eating breakfast out every day before you get to work, maybe wake up 15 minutes early and make yourself a breakfast at home and take that $5 you would have spent on breakfast and put it in a jar, Then at the end of the month, cash it in and that could be $60, $70, $80 in that jar. That could help you buy one or two of those autographs that you need, So for me, I try to do a little side hustle with things like that. At work, if I go in on a Saturday, I get a stipend. To me, that's free money. So you know what? I use that to buy some cards. So, when you're going to dip your toe into the pond, you have to make a decision as to not take away from the family or bills. But on the same token, you want to make sure that you're collecting in your wheelhouse. At 50 years old, my eyes are not as good as they used to be. I'm perfectly happy collecting 4, 5s, and 6s. I don't need 8, 9s, and 10s. I can't even tell the difference between an 8 and a 9. Probably can't even tell the difference between a 7 and a 9. So for me, 4, 5s, and 6s are great.
Well, for me, I'll take the 2 and 3 if there's some good eye appeal to them on certain cards. Honestly, like I like the card to have good eye appeal, but for me personally, and listen, I agree with you. There's no right or wrong way to collect, and I know people that go for really high grade stuff, and they're more patient, and they're doing kind of the same thing we are. I lack patience, unfortunately. So for me, it's just if I can find like a nice low grade copy, I'll take that all day. Because if I buy that, that Jim Brown in a 2, well, then maybe I can go out and buy the Lynn Dawson rookie in a 3 or something like that, as opposed to just one. But but I agree with you totally. It's whatever makes you happy, whatever you enjoy. To me, the right thing to collect is what do you like looking at? Like when I go down into my collection, I like looking at the cards that I have. If I see, if you like looking at it, you're doing it right.
I agree.
So I think what we discussed before we came online was what would a newbie do? What advice could you give to somebody who wanted to start collecting vintage football cards? Let's say for myself, I tried looking into ice hockey cards for a minute. I ended up buying this massive lot of ice hockey cards, probably about 4,000 to 5,000 different cards. And I was thinking, let's just look, see what. I didn't have enough time to go in. I bought it at like a collectibles fair, so I didn't have time to go through and check them out. But when I was scanning through, I could see like numbered cards. I could see there were a couple of autos, all sorts of really weird, different bits and pieces. And I'm like, I'm a card collector. I should be able to figure out this. It's just basically turning my attention to hockey and being able to figure it out. And I was absolutely wrong. It's really tough. If you try and go into a completely different area of card collecting, like that they were all upper deck cards. And so I kind of forgot what the upper deck cards were like and which ones were expensive and which ones were commons and which ones were inserts. I guess it's a roundabout way of saying, if I wanted to kind of just slowly begin in the vintage football card collecting scene and start by buying a couple and just kind of learning how the market works, what advice would you two give a newbie on how they would begin and where they would go from that very first point, that kind of thing?
So I think for me, what I would say is, there's the Hall of Fame, and then there's the Hall of Very Good,
Mm.
guys that have the potential to make the Hall of Fame. And there's websites you can go on there and you can type in who's going to make, the Hall of Fame in 2026, 2027, 2028. You can look at the senior committee and you can hedge your bet on a few of those guys that you think are going to make it. And you can buy those guys dirt cheap. Like I always knew in my heart, Antonio Gates is going to make the Hall of Fame.
Mhm.
I was actually shocked that he didn't make it on the first ballot, but that's beside the point. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I knew enough to buy his rookie card. There's another gentleman, I'm going to show you his card, who just made the Hall of Fame, Randy Grandisher, right? So I
Great
got
card.
great player, great card. This is in a 7. I got this for $20. And the guy's now in the Hall of Fame. This is not a $20 card anymore now that he made the Hall of Fame. So, you have to kind of hedge your bet, and you can do it smart. There's ways of doing it where, you're basically getting these cards for nothing. This card ungraded, I have one laying around over here. This one's ungraded. I think this one was, $5.
Mm-hmm.
How do you pass that up, So for me, I think there's a way to get into it if you don't have a lot of money and you're just dipping your toe into the pond. Go after the guys that are $20, $30. And then what you also do is go on Google and just do a little research on them. And just some of these guys have had interesting lives and interesting stories. And when you start to know that, you're like, man, that guy's really cool. He may never make the Hall of Fame, but what a life story, And for me, there was I don't know if Justin, you remember, his name was Gene Big Daddy Lipscomb. Do you know who Gene Lipscomb is? Played for the Colts.
Yeah.
The guy was an amazing player, but unfortunately he liked drugs, alcohol, and women. And usually all three of those together don't really mix. He ended up dying fairly young, but the guy was an amazing player with an amazing life, lived a fast life. So you know what? I bought his rookie card at a show that I went to. It was $2.
Wow.
So for me, $2, no problem. I'll buy a $2 Gene Lipscomb. So, you if you do a little homework and you just kind of find someone interesting or you see the life story, it brings it home for you,
Yeah, that's really great advice. That's really great. I like that. We just had a guest on a couple of weeks ago, and he was from St. Louis, and he found a guy whose story sounds very similar, but he was a basketball player, and his name was Marvin Bad News Barnes. And it was exactly the same thing. Really fast life, big fur coats, all that kind of thing. Played for a team called the Spirits of St. Louis. And it's the same thing. It's just like this guy's story is interesting and the card is just stunning too. So I really like that idea of collecting, I think, big characters. But like you said, guys who are almost in the Hall of Fame would be a really great place to start. Justin, do you have any advice for a beginner who might be wanting to kind of dip their toe or just kind of get started in the vintage football era?
So the first advice I'd have is follow Mike's advice, because I do that too.
Yeah.
There's plenty of Hall of Very Good guys. One of the coolest looking cards in vintage football to me and Mike, if the 1950 Bowman set, the Paul Tank Younger rookie card. Yep. I have that in a PSA 4. I got it for $12. And if you Google this card, this is a beautiful card. And Tank Younger was a great player. Well, very good, Hall of Very Good type guy, but he ended up being the first African-American executive in professional football history. So this is a guy who was historically important in the NFL, very good player. And this card, man, I'm telling you, Google that. I wish I'd have brought it up here with me, but it's a beautiful card. So I love what Mike's saying and prospecting on future Hall of Famers. I do that all the time myself, and that's an awesome way to go. Another suggestion I have, because one thing that I like about the Hall of Fame chase in general is I like the idea of having cards that feel historical to me. Guys who were a huge part of football history, and to get their kind of iconic rookie card, that's something that I just really like to possess. And a way you can do that and not spend much cash is go after defensive players. I checked some of this stuff this week just to make sure that I'm on point here, but every card that I have right here, I got a few to show here. Can we see that one? That's Dick Night Train Lane. Night Train Lane is, you want to talk about a guy with a story. And by the way, this is a top 100 player. He was on the NFL's 100th anniversary team, and that PSA 4 is going to run you 40 or 50 bucks. If you can buy one raw for about 20, 25. And this guy, when he was a baby, his biological father was a pimp and his mother a prostitute. And they had this child and didn't want it. And they left him in a garbage can. Like a lady found him in the garbage can because she thought it was a cat in there. And he was eventually adopted and, grew up. He served in the United States Armed Forces and had a heck of a career as a cornerback in the NFL. He was, I think, voted at one point by NFL Films or ESPN or something, the second hardest hitter in football history behind Dick Butkus. So,
That's right.
This is from the iconic 1957 top set that I think we'll probably maybe talk about a little bit later on. But that's a huge card and you can get it very cheap. Now, this one, Ray Nitschke. Ray Nitschke, if you follow football at all, Ray Nitschke is one of the best linebackers in football history. Iconic guy, iconic card from 63 Tops. I priced out that SGC4 this week to see what it was going for. The last one went for like $32 on eBay. It's like, and these are cards that, when Beckett did their, top 100 football cards of the first 100 years of the NFL, these cards all made that list. So these are cards that if you have these in your collection, and I'm sure, and Mike, I
do. I have them.
Agree. Yeah, I think you'd probably agree with me that if you showed somebody this card, you'd be like, oh, wow, that is a great card to have. But they're dirt cheap. And the same true here. Deacon Jones, if they kept sack statistics during his entire career, he would very possibly at least be the NFL's all-time sack king. Now, this guy was a mean son of a gun. I saw an interview with him when I was a kid, and he was talking about how he used to put like a piece of metal. He'd wrap a piece of metal in his hand when he'd tape his hand up, and he'd hit other players in the ear hole. And the woman interviewing him asked him, she's like, don't you worry about what that was going to do to people? And I'll never forget the way he said it. Deacon Jones goes, honey, when I played, I didn't play to put my opponent on the ground. I played to put him in the graveyard. It's like, all right. That is a mentality right there. But I mean, his rookie card, this thing again, I mean, you're going to get that for sub $50 all day in a 3 or a 4 or something to that effect. And the last one, just great stuff. Go ahead, Mike, please.
I was just going to say, I completely agree with you on the defensive end. It may not sound glorious to new collectors. They want the well-known and flashy guys, but defensive guys, you can save a fortune on defensive guys.
And if you want to get the well-known and flashy guys, that's great. But you'll probably, if you're trying to get at the same price point, and trying to pick up guys like, Johnny Unitas or Bart Starr or something, you're probably going into those second or third year cards, which is great. If that's what you want to do, that's a great option as well. But these are like, Hall of Fame rookies that are very iconic cards. And the last one I had is Mean Joe Green. This is another one for if you're looking for it in a 3, 4 or something, you're going to pick it up for under $50. And this guy was the anchor of the Steel Curtain defense. So those are just a few specific ones I recommend, but in general, defensive players are a very good way to get in and get yourself some iconic Hall of Fame rookies.
So I'm going to show you. I remember I was going to tell you that I wanted to talk about a guy. He's a linebacker, and you might know him, Justin.
I think I know where you're going with this.
A 10-time Pro Bowler. Yep. A 10-time Pro Bowler. Played for the Detroit Lions.
One of my guys, yep.
You know who he is?
Joe Schmidt.
You got it, Joe Schmidt.
That's a heck of a card.
This guy right here, this card, you can ungraded, you can get this card for $20. Now I'm going to show you something else next to the Joe Schmidt. This is Joe Schmidt autograph, and I sent him a letter asking him for his autograph. He's 92 years old. He sent it back to me, wrote 10-time Pro Bowl on it, and also signed my index card and said, Mike, thanks for being a fan.
Mike, you're making me jealous now. That is incredible.
To me, how do you be? I mean, this guy, to take his time at 92 years old to even write me back is amazing, and just he probably sits there and says, hey, you know what? I'm in my 90s and somebody remembers me. Somebody's sending me a letter saying, hey, I admire what you did on the field. You were a fabulous player. I mean, it's so great when you can go to your mailbox and say to yourself, I might get something other than a bill today, I mean,
yeah, that's right.
And there's another guy that I think he's not in the Hall of Fame yet. He's an 8-time Pro Bowler. Unfortunately, defensive. Unfortunately, he's had the unluck of playing for the Bengals. So the Bengals were notoriously terrible in the 70s. So his name was Lamar Parrish. Mm-hmm. Lamar Parrish, again, an 8-time Pro Bowl player. I asked Lamar Parrish to sign my card,
Awesome.
and he wrote 8-time Pro Bowler on it for me. So this is again a guy that, in my opinion, should make the Hall
He's
of Fame
going to get
someday.
in. Absolutely
But-
someday.
Now, when he does, I think I paid for this one was $16, and this is in a 6.
Incredible.
And I think for his raw card, I might have paid $5 for it. So throw it in the mail, get him to sign it. I mean, it's a no-brainer for me, you know. And those are just 2 defensive guys. And like you were saying, again, defense, you know, one of my favorites,
There
Dick
you
Butkus.
go.
So I got him in a 5. I think this one, you know, again, depending on your price range, I think in a 5, this was, I want to say maybe 300.
I was going to say, yeah, 350.
Probably somewhere around there. And then one of my favorite defensive players, I mean, you got Bob Lilly. This card has gone I think I paid for this in a 6. I think I paid $245.
Oh,
And
that's it's way up now.
It's way up
that
now.
one's a short print though. So that one
it's a short
helps
print.
the value of that. Yeah.
And it's in really good shape. You know, you can say it's a 6. It looks great, and you know, very happy to have it. And then again, you know, when you start getting into these guys that you are, you know, starting to get into the hundreds range, you know, 200-300. Another iconic card, you know, Walter Payton.
Zone.
Yep.
And you know, for me, like this is where it really turned to the vintage for me, because when someone tells you Walter Payton rookie, you immediately get this image, right?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody tells you Joe Burrow rookie, which Joe Burrow rookie?
Yeah, you're right.
There's
Yeah, you're
5,000.
right.
You know, so there's it doesn't feel special. But when someone says I got a Walter Payton, you know it, you know.
That is just an iconic photo in that card too. I know I talked about that last time when I was on here, but man, just that smile captures, you know, Walter Payton's personality, and just a beautiful card.
And for Will, for you, for someone that maybe doesn't know that much about vintage or is looking for an iconic set, to me, the Don Hutson, the 1955 All-Americans are just an amazing set. You know, they really put Bowman out of business in the football game with this set.
Really?
You know, and
That
it's just
picture is awesome.
it's a great picture. The back is you know, kind of filled with a lot of information. I mean, the card was just a great card. And for anyone who doesn't know who Don Hutson is, the guy still has records 80 years old that, you know, are still standing today. The guy was the Jerry Rice of his generation back then in the 30s. Phenomenal
I would say
player.
till Jerry Rice came along, he was probably, I would say, the best wide receiver in NFL history, really, until Rice came along. You had a couple guys in there, but yeah, Hudson was the man. I love that card too. That's my favorite card in that set. I know we'll talk about some sets and stuff later, but that's one of my favorite cards too.
So, you know, you have to really kind of figure out your price point without, you know, killing yourself. There's bargains to be had everywhere. This is Steve Largent in a 7. This was $32. Like, how do you not buy a Steve Largent in a 7?
And for those who don't know, Steve Largent's another Hall of Fame receiver that was probably, again, still might be a top 5 to 10 wide receiver all time.
And let me tell you, he signs through the mail $5.
Wow.
Put $5 in the envelope.
Can you talk a little bit about how through the mail would work for listeners? So, for example, I don't know if Justin knows how.
I've never done this before.
Have you tried it? Yes, he might be absolutely keen to do this now. Justin's like, ooh.
Yeah, I'm listening.
My first experience with being here in New Jersey, we do have once a month we have a show that's fairly close to where I live, and I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of vintage. There was a gentleman there who had binders and binders. I'm talking probably 10,000 autograph cards. He's been doing it for 30 or 40 years. His name was Bob. Very nice guy. Incidentally, all of his cards have finally sold out. So when I was pursuing my Hall of Fame autographs to go along with my rookies, I was buying a lot of cards from him. And I just, you know, after going to see him once a month and just getting to know him, I asked him, how do you get all of these cards? I mean, this must have took you forever. And he said, no, not really. You know, we go, you know, being in the business, I attend games, I go to shows, I do private signings, and I also do through the mail. And he said, there's websites out there, and there's lots of them out there, Sports Card Forum, Sports Card Net, I think another one is called, where They would list addresses. You would put in the sport: football, baseball, basketball, racing, wrestling, whatever it is, and you type in the person that you're looking for, and it would give you the address, and it would also give you the success. So somebody would say, "Hey, I sent the card on March 3rd. I got the card back on March 28th. I sent him 2 cards. He only signed one. He said that he, wants a $5 fee." So there's people in the community that kind of help you understand if a person signs, what rate, what percentage you get. Another example would be Jim McMahon. He's played for the Bears. He charges $20 for his autograph. So if you send him a card and put $20 in there, he's going to sign it. But if you didn't know that, you would have sent him a card. He probably would have never responded to you, or maybe would have sent it back and just said, "Hey, no, kid, I'm signing, but it's going to cost some money." So I have been doing that. I've probably started it about 6 months ago, and I've received in the 6 months, I sent out so far about 110, and I've gotten 95 back so far, and 23 of them are Hall of Famers.
That's awesome.
Yep.
It's a great idea. It's such a great idea. I'll have to start looking to do that in New Zealand. Yeah. It's such a great idea. I think it's the personalization as well, because you're the one to send the card out in the mail.
Yes.
And then sometimes, like you say, they're writing you personal messages back, and you're just like, I'm getting a message from someone from the Hall.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
that's so cool.
Being a Ram fan, I even send out to some of the Ram players that I know, that I've watched growing up, and the guys have no shot of ever making the Hall of Fame, but they're just humble and nice guys. I mean, the guy wrote an entire thing on my index card saying, "Thank you for being a fan. I went to Penn State and I had the privilege of playing for the Rams, and it was a great part of my life. And thank you for reaching out. And it's my honor to sign the card for you." Like just getting that personal experience is so nice, And I do find that the older players, the retired players, are very, very kind. And one of them, Bob Lilly, will sign for $5. Wow. If you send him the rookie card, he will sign it, and it's just, how do you beat that? That's, in case you didn't notice, maybe Justin, if you go on eBay, his autograph doesn't sell for a lot of money. And it's for that reason, because the guy is so nice and he signs everything. So you know what? How do you beat that? The guy's just a classy guy.
And the thing with a guy like Bob Lilly, right? This isn't just a Hall of Famer. This is like, if you add tiers of Hall of Famers, he's like up at the very top. Bob Lilly's a legend, so that's incredible.
11-time Pro Bowler, I think he is. I mean, it's amazing, right? 11-time Pro Bowler.
Hey, I have a different question about vintage cards. Obviously, some of the old baseball cards are known for being faked. Is that an issue with vintage cards? And if it is, would you advise people to buy graded cards to begin with? What would be the deal there?
So I guess my thought on this, and Mike's been in the game a little longer than me, so to speak, so he may have a little bit of wisdom that I don't. But other than a couple of big ticket football cards, like I know the 65 Namath gets faked from time to time, for example, 58 Brown. I don't think fakes are as much the issue with raw cards in football as they are baseball. They exist, but I don't think it's as much of a thing, at least in my experience. The problem with raw in vintage football, or the raw in, I think, any vintage, is, how good are you at being able to tell, is it trimmed? Has color been added? Any alterations, things like that. My sort of deal is, so when I started out in vintage football, I would see these, because you can get deals buying raw. You can get deals on cards, half price or something like that. And I took some chances. Some of them paid off. I bought a 1950 Bowman Autogram for $150 off eBay. It looked good. I took a chance. I sent it in. It got a 3.5 from SGC, which is an amazing return on that. And at the same time, when I first started out, I bought a raw Walter Payton off eBay that looked almost perfect for $200, and it came back that it had been trimmed. So at this point, I'm like, I just don't feel like I was still able to recoup some of my money and sell it. And I now own actually an SGC 6 Walter Payton as well. So same as what Mike showed earlier. But so for me now, having kind of been through the ringer a little bit, I don't feel like gambling anymore. So most of what I buy offline, like off eBay or something like that, is typically graded. But if I go to a show and I can look at the card myself and I kind of know what the set looks like and know what the dimensions of the card should look like, or if I really trust a seller, or off ComC, I'll usually trust. The only thing off ComC that's risky is with vintage cards, one of the problems can be the cutting of the cards was not as uniform as it is now. So if you send them off for grading, sometimes you can get an authentic minimum size not met. That doesn't mean the card's trimmed. It just means that it came out of the factory, not quite big enough. ComC doesn't control for that. But everything else, they're typically, they'll give you a refund if your card's trimmed, altered, anything like that. So if it's a trusted source, I'll still buy raw and try to get a deal. Or if it's something to where I see a card pop up and I'm like, okay, I have to take a chance on this because the deal is so good. For example, this past year, and Mike, this will mean something to you, obviously, as a vintage football collector, because I think outside of the community, maybe people wouldn't appreciate how big a card this is for us. But the 48 Leaf Bednarik, I saw one pop up online. It was raw, but it was going for a very, very good price. And I'm like, I'm gonna take a shot at it. It came back graded. It did come back minimum size not met, but I'm good with that. Me personally, I can deal with that for a rare card. It hasn't been trimmed. It hasn't been altered. I can do the minimum size thing for a rare card like that if it looks good, and I think mine does. So if it's something to where like, okay, this is a rare card, and I'm willing to basically kind of risk my money on it, great. But for the most part, unless I know the seller, unless I can check the card out myself or something, at this point, I just don't take the chance. But if you're willing to gamble a little bit, there are deals to be had, and you can win big on some of them.
So I'm with Justin. I'm skeptical, and you may meet someone and the card could be fake and they don't know it. It could be trimmed and they don't know it. I love raw cards. I have no problem buying them, but I'm the same way. I need to touch it. I need to examine it. For me, then I feel comfortable. If I'm doing it on eBay, Greg Morris cards is very good. He's reputable and he's honest. In my opinion, I have no issue buying anything from him. But when you're at a show, if you're going with a target in mind, let's say you're looking at cards from the 60s or the 70s, my suggestion would be to bring a common card with you. Then you can lay it next to it. You can line it up. When you have an old vintage card, you have to smell it. It's going to smell musty. It's going to smell old. A new card you can't replicate that smell. You can't replicate the smell of someone's attic or smell of someone's basement with these old cardboards. So you know what? When you smell a card, you'll know it. You'll just know this card is old. When you line up another one with it, you can tell, hey, this one looks a little off. I'm not going to take a chance. The other thing you can do is with these older cards, they're thicker stock. If you take a flashlight, just take the flashlight of your phone and shine it, you should not be able to see the light through the card. But on modern cards, you can see through the light. So, if someone shows you a 1950 card, and light is penetrating through it, don't buy it because it's not real. So, there's tricks to it, but I have no allegiance to PSA or SGC. To me, I'll buy the card. I don't care who's grading it. Where I live here in New Jersey, 10 miles from me is PSA. They're located in Jersey City. And I remember being on one of the LinkedIn websites, and there was a job opening at PSA. And it was like $20 an hour. And I'm like, really? I'm sending my, hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of cards, and some probably 22-year-old kid that's making $20 an hour is going to tell me if my card is a 7, 8, or 9. So you know what? I don't really put much stock in the grade. But if you're going to buy a big card, I agree with Justin. You can't take the chance anymore. Concrete Charlie, I'm not buying Concrete Charlie raw. There's no way, no how,
I wouldn't have. But I mean, the deal, I got this thing for $400 for a nice looking Concrete Charlie. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take my chances on that. And I went in knowing I was okay if it came back minimum size not met. Now, if it had come back trimmed or altered, I'd have probably kicked myself and been unhappy. But I was good with it. I'm like, I like the look of this card. If that's all it is, I can deal with it. So, but yeah, I don't blame you at all, because that's one where you can, because you're going to fork out money for it, even at a good price. You're
Absolutely.
forking out multiple hundreds of dollars. But by the way, Will, that's one where I think the last SGC one that I saw went for near $1,000. I want to say it was like 8 something on
It's about
eBay.
$800 card. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, because it's rare. It's a short print from 1948.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a handful left. Wow.
At the show that I go to, there's always one dealer, and he has about 5 or 6 Johnny Unitas rookie cards, and he's got a few of them that are graded, but he's got 5 or 6 that are raw, and the raw, obviously he's got them at a good price, at probably $300-400, but I would never pull the trigger. I'm just like, why does he not send these out to get graded? Even if they grade a 2 or a 3, so it doesn't sit well with me. So I did eventually buy one. I bought it in a PSA 4. And I don't know. I probably paid $500 for it, but it's probably what it goes for.
Yeah,
in a 4. So
that sounds exactly right.
I didn't get a deal, but I didn't get ripped off. I paid but I wanted it. I admired him. I heard all the stories. I saw all the videos of the guy, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna flip the coin here and just buy it. And that's what I did.
I actually have another question about, so you guys have talked a little bit about them and you've been leaning towards this, but what do you think are some of the best sets of vintage football cards to kind of look at, or those sorts of things to go to? Justin's smiling. You're ready to go.
I'm so excited to hear Mike's
what-
opinion on this. I am so excited
okay.
because honestly, when we started doing this, I love to hear other vintage collectors' views on other sets.
So I'll put it this way. For me, when you look at baseball and you look at football, people will always say, oh, with a baseball card, they're not wearing a helmet. You get to see the person's face. You get to kind of almost have an interaction because you can actually make the facial features. But when you're wearing a helmet, it's a little bit harder to kind of, feel that. So when you're looking at sets where you can see Bob Lilly in the 63s, the 67 set, to me, that's iconic. You get to see this guy, right there. So that's a pretty good set to me. The 55 All-Americans are just unbelievable set. I think every card in that set just looks amazing. They're in their college uniforms with a game that's behind it that probably doesn't even have anything to do with Don Hudson, but it didn't matter, gives you all the information you need on the back about the guy. Just an iconic set. And like you said, the 48 Leaf is one of my favorites. I have a ton of 48 Leafs. I like them better than the Bowmans. I just, the Bowmans are the black and white, the photo. I prefer the Leaf because it's got the color, and they're a little bit harder to get in good condition. Those colors fade, and sometimes you get the ink bleed through from the back. So they're a little bit harder to chase, but I enjoy having them.
Yeah, I love every one of those sets that Mike just mentioned. 48 Leaf in particular is a top 2 set for me. Some that I would add to that list. One that I have really grown to appreciate more as I've acquired more of them on my collection is the 1935 National Chickle set. Now, this was the first nationally distributed football set ever. There were some other football cards prior to that, but this was the first set that was ever distributed. And man, these are some great looking cards. I mean, they're some really cool looking cards, and it's a set that I've grown to appreciate more as I've sort of started to possess more of them. I also am a huge fan of 57 Topps, which we've talked about, which has that Johnny Unitas rookie, the Night Train Lane rookie I showed earlier, but also Bart Starr rookie card, Raymond Berry, Paul Horning. So you just have some huge cards. And I love that set because I've got the one here so I can show it, because you have the portrait photo on one side and the action shot on the other. And I think that's a really cool part of that set. And then 52 Bowman Large. I think those are just beautiful, beautiful cards, and some big ones in there. You got the Frank Gifford rookie. You got the Hallis, the George Hallis, one of the great coaches in NFL history. His rookie.
Andy Robustelli, Les Richter.
Les Richter's in that set. Yale Larry, Jack Christensen, a couple of my Lions greats are in that set. And then my all-time favorite set, actually, though, is 1950 Bowman. I think those are some of the most beautiful cards ever made. You got the autogram in that set, rookie, Y.A. Tittle, Marion Motley, Lou
Marion
Groza.
Motley.
I love that Motley card is one that I think
Great.
is super underrated. And it's beautiful.
I have it in a 4.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I have it in a 2. But my 2 there's a crease kind of down in the left corner, but the color on it is very sharp and it's well centered. So it's one I love looking at. And for those who don't know, Marion Motley was one of the 4 players who kind of reintegrated the NFL in the 1940s. I think 1946 to be exact. And of those 4 players, there's 2 Hall of Famers, Bill Willis and Marion Motley. No idea why Bill Willis does not have a rookie card in the 50 Bowman set. He doesn't have a rookie card at all, really.
Yes.
So Marion Motley of those 4 is the only Hall of Fame rookie there, and that's one of the big cards in the 50 Bowman set. But I think those are just beautiful cards, some great players, and just an iconic look to them. So for me, in addition to the ones you mentioned, which I think are great sets, those are some that I would highlight.
Yeah. The 62s are pretty nice too. You know,
Yes.
with the black border. They're very hard to get in good condition because of the black border.
Mhm.
But you've got some, great players in the 62 set,
Yeah,
How do you beat
that's the
that?
Ditka rookie, Tarkenton. Also Ernie Davis, which is not a Hall of Fame rookie, but first African-American Heisman Trophy winner who actually tragically died of leukemia before he ever played a snap in the NFL. But he's got a card in that set, and I think that's a really cool one to have too.
Roman Gabriel's in there and Billy
Yes.
Kilmer is in there. So they're good cards. Billy Kilmer signs for free, by the way.
Does he
So if you
really?
Yep, I sent him the 62 Fleer.
I have
mean,
that 62.
I sent it to him, and he did sign it for me. And he writes Bill, though, not Billy. He writes Bill Kilmer on it. And he writes his number 17. So I was so happy to get it.
That's
But the
very
guy
cool.
signed it. Yep. Super stoked to have that one.
All right, so we're back, and I did ask the guys if they could just share some stories with us about collecting, whether they're fun or super lucky or unlucky. And Mike has a great story to share. So, Mike, if you don't mind, just go ahead.
So, again, for me, I just consider myself unlucky when it came to opening boxes. I managed to pull every person that would eventually never have an NFL career. And no disrespect for them. They made the NFL, I guess.
That's right.
So congratulations to that. But, the closest I ever came was I remember I pulled a Trent Richardson autograph. And I'm like, yeah, I got a Trent Richardson. And then, Trent Richardson
Huge
was
bust.
Trent. Yes. So there goes that. And the other one was a Garrett Wolf. He played for the Bears, supposedly. I never saw him ever play. But he made the Bears team, and that was it. He
was a stud at Northern Illinois in college. I remember that. I remember because they played Ohio State that year. My dad's an Ohio State alum. So I've always followed Buckeye football, and their opening game that year was Northern Illinois, and Garrett Wolf played good in that game for whatever that's worth.
Well, I have a gold auto to 10, so whatever that's worth. But I can tell you actually a pretty good a good story. When I went to a local card show, again, being here in New Jersey, we do have quite a few. There was I'd like to say he was a young guy. He was probably about 35. He had a bunch of boxes set up and his display cases and all the modern cards in the display case. And I happened to notice he had, I'll call it a bargain bin, and it said vintage, and it said vintage football. So I looked through, and he knew the prices of some of the, the better named players, but he had a few that were not in top loaders. They were just in penny sleeves. And I started to pick some of those out because I knew that I could get them autographed, or I just happened to know that they would be worth more than the $1 that I would pay for them. And the one card he had in there, which I was shocked, was the Paul Krause rookie card.
Really?
So Paul Krause, is the all-time leader in interceptions. He has 81 interceptions, I believe. Played for the Vikings. That was $1. I wish he had 50 of them because I would have bought all 50.
And that's a beautiful card too, by the way.
It's a great card. It was in great shape. I got that one for $1, and I sent that one out to get autographed because I know he signs, and he's already signed one for me. So I'm like, you know what? For $1, I'm sending another one out. So I was pretty stoked. But that's the way I feel. Like, you go to some of these shows, and there's no love for the vintage football.
Yeah.
It's a very select few.
So you don't really get many vintage football vendors anymore. Is that the case, or is it all online, or what's the?
There's a few.
When you go to the shows, you get the same ones, so I see the same
Mm.
inventory. So after you've, picked through them, so to say, it's very rare that you might every third month get a new crop of inventory, but you'll just see the same guys. And, now it's the Pokemon, it's the modern cards, and that's all you see.
Justin, what's your experience with going to shows? Is it the same as Mike's? I know that you're going to the National in a little while, so
Yeah, up here it kind of is. I have my one guy, my one old guy, who I always see at the Chicago Sports Spectacular, and he does have everything, like I've said, but condition varies, price sometimes a little high, but he's got everything under the sun. And, like I said, if once you get to know him a little bit, he'll work with you somewhat. And then beyond that, it's sort of just sporadic where it's like, it'll be kind of like, oh, here's a vintage baseball dealer and he has, 10 to 15 vintage football cards, kind of mixed in there. So yeah, it's kind of the same deal, but I also kind of agree with Mike that if you kind of look through some boxes, you can find some cool stuff. I actually did the same thing, and I picked up the 52 Bowman Large Ollie Matson. Went through a box, picked that up. I ended up getting that for $40. Graded out, it's a PSA 2.5. I mean, that's a heck of a card. That's a short print from 52 sets. So, but again, kind of like just guy in the very back of the show, look through a box and, that's what he sold it to me
That's
for.
a great poll. I have one too. I bought it raw. I paid $100 for it, and mine might be if I had to get a grade, it might be a 3. But I'm with you. That's a great card. You got that at $40. You got a bargain.
Yeah. And that doesn't always work out that way. And I'm kind of like you, like I'll pay for the card what I want. I want a fair deal, but I don't always have to get a bargain. But it's nice every now and then when you do, like Paul Krause for $1. I did not pay $1 for my Paul Krause. I'll tell you that.
And you know what? I think too, when you go to the shows, you have to be respectful. I would never insult someone. Like if I'll give an example of Roger Craig. Roger Craig's card is $2. It's sometimes I go to a show and someone's trying to sell it for $10. I'm not going to say to the guy, "Are you out of your mind? That sells for $2 on eBay." You just say, "What do you want for it?" $10. Oh, okay, thank you very much, and you just mosey on. So I never try to lowball anyone. I don't like doing that. I don't think it's respectful to do that. So I would, if somebody had $100 on a card, I'm not offering them 15 for a $100 card.
Yeah.
And sometimes you see people that are asking for ridiculous deals, and I can't see myself being that guy.
Yeah.
So Mike, do you just? Oh, sorry, Justin. Mike, do you just collect vintage football, or were you collecting anything else?
So growing up, I was doing baseball. Incidentally, I was doing both, and it just became too expensive. I stopped in 1993, which happened to be Derek Jeter's rookie year. I do have a few Derek Jeters, but none of the high end ones. I have like Pinnacle and Score. Nothing that would, maybe $20, $30 cards, nothing crazy. But I just focused strictly on football at that point. And, I'm glad that I did, because ultimately when I leave this planet, I've probably got 35,000 cards. I don't want to inundate. I don't want to inundate my son with, the burden of all of that. So I kind of like every time I buy a card, I have an Excel spreadsheet and I kind of write down what I've paid for it. It's gotten to the point where I've had to insure my cards. God forbid something happens in the house so I've insured them, but I want to be able to just tell him, "Hey, son, these are the, 1 or 2,000 that are worth good money. The rest, $5, $10 cards, who cares? Sell them in bulk and get rid of them, and don't burden yourself with it." So I think, as a collector, you have to be conscious of that, because, I have never been an investor. I have never been a flipper. I just strictly collect what I like. And someday, whether it lost money or whether it's gained money, it's going to be free money for my son. He didn't spend a dime on any of it. It's all what I, spent. So I just don't want him to give it away for nothing. I want him to have a little bit of knowledge. But on the same token, I don't want to see him go through 20,000 cards and spend night after night looking up what something's worth. I'd rather just say, "Hey, everything in this area, just get rid of it. No problem. Just sell it for whatever. But the good stuff, hold on to, or, sell it for, a good price."
That's 35,000. I thought I had allotted a few thousand, maybe like, 5,000, 6,000. I'm like, both Will and my eyes both went huge at that point.
I mean, I got just a tub of them sitting over there in the corner that,
That's incredible.
I could care less about the tub because, again, it's more like that vintage. It's more of the junk wax era, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, that's right. So do you have them organized in folders, or how do you arrange 35,000 cards?
It depends. I mean, they're kind of spread out. I can show you. Like right there there's a tub full.
Awesome. Yeah, cool.
Just a giant tub. And then off over here, you can.
Oh, wow, cool. Yeah.
So they're just kind of like all over the place.
That's great.
That's awesome, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely great.
But I think though when you start to really get into the vintage and you start doing a little homework on some of these guys, I mean, just interesting lives. Like, these guys had to work a regular job when the season was over. You'll know him, Justin, Dante Gluefingers Lavelli. He was a woodworker.
Another great card from the 1950 Bowman set.
Another great set, but when you read the back, it'll say it. In his off time, he was a woodworker.
Mm-hmm.
Like he didn't go to the gym to train. He had to put food on the table for his family.
Wow,
it's amazing.
And how about you, Justin? Oh, sorry. You go, Mike.
I also think that when you take for granted, like we have guys today that play offense, they play defense. When you read some of these, they were quarterback, place kicker. Special teams, wide receiver. The guys played every position.
Sammy Baugh, he was a D-back, punter, quarterback.
Yeah, right? It's George Blanda was another one.
Yeah,
right?
and he played till he was 112 or something, too. He was so old.
Yeah. So, I mean, you got to respect anybody that could have had a career that long. I mean, surgeries, doctors, the technology wasn't there. I mean, some of these guys had a knee injury. I mean, Gale Sayers, he didn't have a long career.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see the ability that these guys had and what they had to play with.
How about someone, speaking about a guy who played multiple, I guess, not so much multiple positions, but played the offensive end and the defensive end, and Deion Sanders. Would he be considered like pre-modern or almost vintage these days? And is his card affordable? Because he's someone that speaks to me because he's a lot of fun.
Very cheap. You can get his rookie cards
really?
unless you want a PSA 10 or something. His score rookie, which is kind of his iconic rookie card. I mean, I picked it up. I think I have that in a PSA 8, and I think I bought it for like $10 at a show. I mean, I think it'd be a little more now with the coaching thing. This was a few years ago,
sure.
probably.
Yeah, it's really cheap.
Yeah,
his autograph is expensive. His autograph is expensive. For him to sign Michael Irvin's very, very hard, very expensive. Troy Aikman, I don't know why Dallas, but for whatever reason, those guys are very expensive when it comes to autographs. But all their cards are cheap.
Yeah. Junk wax era.
Yep.
Okay. Then I might be looking into a prime time. That might be my first.
That's a good pickup. That's a great pickup.
Even Joe Montana. I mean, I paid $100 for a Joe Montana in a 6.
Yeah, that's I think about what I paid too for my 6.
Wow.
And again,
and 10 must go for a lot more, though. I assume though.
Oh yes, 10 would go for a lot more.
Yeah, 10s are pricey.
But if you look at it, and I'll always compare Joe Montana and Joe Burrow. When someone sits to me and they say, "Well, Joe Burrow's card is $1,500," and I'll say, "Well, on your team, would you rather Joe Burrow or Joe Montana? If you had to go into a Super Bowl, who do you want?" So to me, I'll buy Joe Montana all day.
Agree.
Yeah, I think what you were saying at the beginning too, Mike, was when you started collecting cards and you were looking for guys, it was almost as if you're prospecting on them and their futures and that kind of thing. Whereas when you're looking at vintage, their resume speaks for itself. So you're picking them up super cheap, and you're just like, why would you not?
A perfect example of it was Aaron Donald. Not just being a Rams fan, but I knew after that first year, Aaron Donald was special. I probably bought 30 of his rookie cards, and I paid probably $2 to $10 for every one of them. I think I have 2 autographs from his rookie year on cards that I maybe paid $15 for, because no one cared. He was a defensive player,
He's still pretty cheap, by the way.
They're still pretty. The guy's a 10-time Pro Bowler. The guy is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, and you can still buy his card for $10.
Yeah,
that's a card you should
good
go out
card
and buy.
too.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't understand why, but it's just defensive players. They're just cheap.
Yeah, that's always an interesting thing. I guess just because they're not the ones who are always in the news, because it seems like, from what I can tell, you got quarterbacks, and then what would the next tier down be? Like wide receivers?
It's quarterbacks and everybody else kind of in collective. If we're talking about the hobby, it's like the premium on quarterbacks is huge, because receivers is probably the next one down. But I mean, it's a
daylight between them, huh?
Steep drop. Yeah, I mean, quarterbacks are where you're going to spend the money, whether it's in vintage or modern or anything like that. For the most part, you're going to pay up for the quarterbacks.
If you want a good bargain, I think buying the early 80s, the Hall of Famers like Randy White, is going to be a cheap card. Steve Largent is going to be a cheap card. But you got a lot of good players in the 80s that you can pick up really cheap. That's Jerry Rice, John Elway, Dan Marino, a lot of these guys that are just amazing players that you can get on any budget.
Yeah.
Any budget.
Cool. Yeah, definitely a good piece of advice for people who are looking to maybe segue into a little bit of football card collecting, just starting with those late 80s cards and then moving from there and seeing what, like you said, the stories behind the players,
Sure. There's another guy, his rookie year is 86, Lomas Brown. Lomas Brown is an 8-time Pro Bowler. You could buy his card for $2.
No,
there's a lot of guys like that in the 80s. Like Mike's exactly right. You get into you want some 80s stuff. I mean, you can get some amazing cards for $1 or $2. Go through bargain bins. You could load up on 80s Hall of Famers.
And that's the whole thing. I mean, yeah, he's an 8-time Pro Bowler. Will he make the Hall of Fame? Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. But you spend $2 on the card. Isn't it worth having an 8-time Pro Bowler for $2?
Yeah. Yeah, instead of these guys who might be good in the future, who maybe have made one.
Yeah.
And you're paying top dollar for them right now.
I mean, what does TJ Watt go for? I mean, he's an amazing player. I mean, his cards really probably aren't even that expensive either.
No, it's pretty reasonable. You can get his Prism rookie for like $40 in a PSA 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
I mean, Ray Lewis, another one, right?
I was about to ask about Ray Lewis, exactly.
He's
Ray
got the
Lewis
Bowman.
is a little more expensive, though, as far as defensive players from the mid-90s. You will pay a pretty decent, relatively speaking, price. It'll be over $50 to get his rookie in a 9. His Bowman's best.
Yeah, for Bowman's best, though, right? Yeah. I mean, I think I got it raw. I think I paid $20 for it. I don't know what it would grade out as, but yeah, I paid $20 for a Ray Lewis. I mean, and that's a great
not bad
card.
at all.
Yeah,
I bought mine in a PSA 9 because Ray Lewis is one of my all-time favorites. So I went with a 9 on that one, and that I think ran me about $75 or something.
Yep.
Yeah, not bad. Yeah, I guess when you look at the numbers between like modern and vintage, it's like in terms of price points, they're much more affordable overall. But it's still smart to do a little bit of research beforehand, and then, like you said right at the beginning, Mike, pick what you like. And there are a couple of guys that I'm already leaning towards. So I think Primetime might be my first purchase. I think that's what I'm going to do as soon as we get off the call. I'll be like, let's see what we can get up on ComC for that.
Yeah, you will not pay much for it. I can promise you that.
Cool.
Always remember, too, modern players, the guys that are still playing the game, their careers are not finished. You can have a career-ending injury. You can have a drunk driving. You can have a domestic abuse. How many players have gone down, this way? At least when you're going for the vintage, their careers are done. These players, they're established. They're not going to do any more or any less. So you know what you're going to get. You know what you're going to get when you're buying a guy from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. A guy that comes out tomorrow, I mean, like I said, he can do 120 in his Porsche and crash and get a DWI, and that's the end of his career. You've invested quite a lot of money into buying 10 or 20 of his cards, and there it goes.
Yeah, and you look at all that modern prospecting, even in baseball with Wander Franco. It's just like it's all gone up in smoke now.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of issues in that sense too. Hey, Justin, do you have a story yourself about like a collecting story, maybe like someone you met or a good
So,
deal you
so, so
got,
you,
or
Mike's got me nostalgic. So I'll go quick because I know people have probably been listening to us for a while now.
yeah,
But Mike telling these stories about poor luck in pulling cards. I'm generally that way too. My brother's the lucky one. He's a collector, and every time he gets in a break, he'll send me. He's a basketball card collector. He'll be like, "Oh, I got this Steph Curry auto. I got this Embiid 1 of 1 auto." It's like that's him, not me. Um, but when I was 8 years old, so I'm a Lions fan, lifelong Lions fan, grew up in Michigan. But as a kid, of course, the Lions are in the NFC, and besides, a couple years with Barry Sanders, we weren't always very good. So I had an AFC team too, and my AFC team has been the Bills. I adopted them before that first, like the year they made that first Super Bowl run. I like Jim Kelly. I like Thurman Thomas, Bruce Smith, the whole team. They were exciting. They were fun to watch. And actually, I didn't know it at the time, but they were going to be a great compliment for the Lions because heartbreak loves heartbreak. So, just watching two doomed franchises really, I guess, has made me more, tough in the long run or something like that. When I was 8 years old, we had this local bookstore in our town called the Bookmark, and they sold cards right up by the checkout line. And we went in there, and I was with my parents, and I bought a pack of Skybox football cards. I mean, these are cheap, low-end football cards, but for me, when you're 8 years old, you're just excited to get something, right? Hoping to get a player you like. So I'm going through this pack of cards, and I see a Jim Kelly card. It's like, awesome. Besides, like Barry Sanders or some of those guys on the Lions, Jim Kelly was, that's a great pull for me because he's my guy for the Bills. So I kind of pull it down, and I've never seen this before on a card. There's an autograph on it, and I'm like, what is this? I thought, I asked my mom, I'm like, is this a fake? She's like, I don't know. We eventually, I don't remember how we figured this out, but it is actually on-card auto of Jim Kelly from that set. Like it's a Skybox Impact on-card Jim Kelly auto, and I for the life of me can't remember if we figured it out or if my mom eventually just told me it was real, so I would feel good about it. I've checked later subsequently; it is actually an actual auto card. So maybe she just told me she figured it out. I don't know, but either way, I believed that to be at the time an autograph of Jim Kelly. I do not remember another time I was so excited to pull a card from a pack. I remember sleeping with it for at least one night in the case.
yeah.
And so I peaked early because I still think that's the best pull that I've ever had. But Mike talking about pulling cards and luck and stuff reminded me of the one time that I was like, remotely lucky when it came to pulling cards. So,
But I think that the problem with being a little bit lucky once or twice is that you think you're going to be lucky all the time. So you end up buying more wax than you should. Yeah. And that's how I feel because I got lucky a couple of times. And Justin knows I ended up winning a box of basketball cards, this beautifully printed set, really good print stock and really great pictures. It's called Photogenic. And there were 2 chase cards on there that I was like, I wonder if we get these, it's going to be amazing. And so one of them had a dual auto with Cade Cunningham and Luka Doncic, and the other one was Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. I'm like, imagine if we got one of these cards. And I pulled the Magic Johnson Larry Bird one. It was incredible. Awesome. Me and my buddies, we were opening up the box of cards in a tiny little pub, and we just kind of all just exploded. We were hugging, we were having a great time. And awesome. Ever since then, I've been chasing that high, and it hasn't gone so well. So I wouldn't recommend being too lucky as well,
Luckily, I haven't been lucky since I was 8 years old, so I'm much like Mike. I just buy the guys I want for the most part now.
That's right, and that's always a smart way. You still got the Jim Kelly card?
I absolutely still have that Jim Kelly. Yes, I do.
Cool. Yeah, there's a difference between buying and pulling it out of the pack yourself, I guess. But after a while, they all seem to mesh into one.
Yeah.
Hey guys, is there anything else that you want to share about collecting, or any cards from your collection that you want to show us? Anything else? Because you've flashed a couple at me, and I'm like, ooh, that one looks good. Tell me the story of this card or this guy. Anything in particular you want to share?
They're all spread out all over the place. I'd have to run up and get a few and pull some out.
Unfortunately for me right now, in terms of showing, because like I said, we're set up at my brother-in-law's house right now, and all my but of course I brought my cards over here so I can look at them while we're in temporary quarters even.
Nice.
So, but they're unfortunately in the room where my 1-year-old is sleeping. So if I go down to get any cards right now, that's going to have consequences I don't want to face, unfortunately. But the ones I had were the ones that I brought up. And just in terms of what else to say is, I mean, I absolutely just want to reiterate kind of some of the things that have been said. If you're looking to get into vintage football, there are some ways to do it really, really, really cheaply and get cards that you really enjoy that look great of players that are really iconic in the hobby. I think that vintage football, and I'm not the only one to say this. I mean, I've seen this actually said on other YouTube channels and things like that. Not that that's the say all end all, but it's an opinion that floats out there. Is if you are somebody, and I'm like Mike, I'm a collector. I collect what I like, and that's kind of how I do it. But if you are somebody that is a little bit more investment driven and thinking, okay, what's going to grow? What's got room for growth? Vintage football is a good option in the sense that it is so low right now that even and the supply of vintage football, if you look at Pop Reports, supply of vintage football cards, bigger cards, is much less than baseball or something like that. So if you have down the road a small spike in demand with the lower supply, you're going to see some growth. I don't think vintage football will ever be up there with vintage baseball or anything like that. But considering where the price point is now, there is opportunity there. If that's something that interests you, for me personally, football's just always been my sport, and I love looking at my cards and I love having them. But, if you're somebody who's a little bit more in that direction, because I know people are in the hobby, for all sorts of reasons, and that's cool. There's some opportunities there, I think, in vintage football down the line.
Cool.
Yeah, I think my piece of advice would be, listen to your heart. Don't worry about what an investor tells you or an influencer tells you. If you like something, even if it's a $5 card, you like it, then it means the world to you. Don't worry about it. And don't get hung up on the grades. You have to find what you can afford. For me to spend $200 on a card, that might seem like, it's only $200 to somebody. Or it might seem like, oh my God, I could spend that $200 on a bill and it's worth, I only want to spend $20 on a card. So you have to find your wheelhouse, and if that means it's 2s and 3s or 4s and 5s, so be it. I have never put any stock in, 8s, 9s, and 10s. Like honestly, I don't think I could even tell the difference between a 9 and a 10. I probably can't tell the difference between a 6 and a 7. So you know what? What do I care? If the card looks good to me, then it's good for me. So, and a card is only worth what you're willing to pay for it. There's always going to be another one. So don't put yourself in the poorhouse to buy something because you spur of the moment and you see it. Don't worry about it. You'll find it somewhere on eBay, ComC. You'll find it at a card show. You might find it at a garage sale. So it'll always be out there.
That's really great advice. I completely agree with you. If you don't have to go with the grades, you go with what you love first. And I think that's something that I'm learning more and more. And I have to remind myself of that too, because I think sometimes in the back of our mind, we get swept up with the whole idea of, we've got to get something that's expensive. Not necessarily. A $5 card can give you as much pleasure as a $500 card,
Yep.
So it's something to keep in mind. Hey, guys, thank you so much for taking the time out. It's been a lot of fun. I know we've all been looking forward to catching up and being able to do this. And I think the next time we catch up, hopefully I'll be able to either flash you a picture of my primetime rookie card, which I'm probably going to go for by now, and it'll be the first card in my. Actually, no, I have some modern NFL cards, but nothing too big. I think I might have one of the 1,000 Joe Burrow cards.
No, I love it.
It was an absolute pleasure. It was an absolute pleasure, guys. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, this has been a blast, Mike. It was so good to meet you and get some of your insight and just benefit from your knowledge and talk to another collector. And Will, always good chatting, man. It was great. Thank you so much for having me again.
Yeah, really appreciate it, boys. All right, we'll talk soon.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.